Hi and welcome to my video. So today I'm going to talk about phases of language learning. Okay, so if you are currently learning a new language, maybe you can relate to this video, or if you are curious about how easy or difficult it is to learn a new language, this video will let you know. There's gonna be some tips as well on how to help you when you're in these different phases of language learning. You will actually be going through all these different phases, or maybe it's just me, I don't know, because I'm relating this to experience. I'm relating it to what I experience when I'm learning Spanish, and also what my friends who are Spanish speakers and they're learning English, sometimes we tell each other stories about how easy or difficult it is to learn a new language. And yeah, I compare all these stories, and usually the experiences are almost the same. So for that reason, I want to do this video because I hope it can help for you to know that you're not alone. Probably it can also help you if you're stuck in some of these phases and you want to go to the next phase. So I hope you will find it useful. Alright, so the first phase of language learning is the I know nothing phase. So it's the phase that you're going to go through when you just decided that you're going to learn a new language. This happens with anything, to be honest. I know nothing. So when you know nothing, it's time for you to do something, right? So the first thing that you would want to do is to learn words. I recommend you to learn simple words, simple sentences, common sentences like greetings and numbers, and how to say simple things like I want to eat, I want to sleep, I want to read, for example. Probably even learn simple sentences that you would probably need to use in restaurants, in when you're trying to buy things at a shop, or when you need to ask for directions. The simple things that you'd probably need to use if you were ever to use the language. Another thing that you can do is to look for the words or sentences that you use a lot in your own language, and find a way to know how to say that in the language that you are learning, and then you can use that even when you're talking to yourself. That's one way to practice using the language that you are learning. You can talk to yourself, whenever you're having inner monologue, have it in the language that you are learning. You can also find a list of common words in the language that you are learning. You can look for this on the internet. That's the simplest way. Let's talk about tools that you can use to actually achieve these targets. This is the phase of language learning where apps can be really useful to you. We're talking about Duolingo, Rosetta Stone, all these apps. Some of them are paid, some of them has paid features, some of them are free. These apps are very useful for you to help learn simple sentences in your target language. This is also the time when Google Translate is your new best friend. I know that sometimes Google Translate can be a little wonky, but it's good enough for a beginner. It's good enough for you to learn the simple sentences, simple words. Don't try and put in complex sentences in Google Translate. Another very great tip is to start a learning wall. What I mean by a learning wall is it'll be a wall that you probably will see every day, that you can stick sticky notes on, and put the different words that you want to learn during that day, or probably that week, probably that month. This concept of using a learning wall to learn words or sentences or concepts that you might need, it's not just an idea that you can use for the beginning phase of language learning. It is actually a good tip to continuously do this for the rest of your language learning experience. Usually you won't be in the I know nothing phase for a very long time. If you're determined, you will probably only be in that phase for probably a month, because the next phase that you are going to go through is the I know something phase. Now, during this phase, your target will be to improve your vocabulary, and constantly expose yourself to the language that you are learning. Okay, this doesn't mean that the things that you were doing during the first phase should stop. You should continue doing those things, but there are a couple of other things that you can add on to this experience. The first one, the one that a lot of people do whenever they're learning a new language, or probably even do before they were learning the new language, is to constantly watch movies and listen to songs in your target language. When you do this, you are familiarizing yourself with the words that you already know and also learn new words. And this immersion method teaches you how to think in this other language, how to speak in this other language. It even teaches you how to imitate native speakers. When you watch movies, you can watch them with subtitles. That would help you to understand the movie, not just watch and not enjoying them because you don't know what the hell is happening. You can also listen to international radio. There's a website, I link it on the description box below. You can access to all the radios in the world. So you can go to the country that you are learning the language from and listen to the radios from there, and constantly just expose yourself to the language. You know, with the advertisements, the radio DJ speaking, and all the music that you can listen to, it is also a good way to learn the language that you are learning. Another great tip is actually to find kids books, because at this phase of language learning, your vocabulary or your language comprehension, your language skill is similar to a kid. So basically you have to remember how you learn your native language. Like when you were reading kids books when you were a kid, that's how you need to treat yourself learning the new language. This is also a great time to start with this. A Pictionary. Yeah, a bilingual Pictionary that will help you with visual learning. This will train you to look at things and call it what it is in the language that you are learning. At a later point in language learning, you want to avoid to constantly translate. Yes, you don't want to constantly translate in from your native language to your target language. This is the problem when you start learning a lot of languages. You just don't know how to say some things in the language that you have been speaking your whole life. Another great tip is, if you can find, especially in YouTube, there's tons of this kind of videos in YouTube. If you can find bilingual videos, which being your native language and also the language that you are learning, if you can find bilingual videos, that would be great. Constantly watch bilingual videos can also help you because it will help you enjoy the video but at the same time learn new words. So in this I know something phase, let's focus on immersion. Just immerse and keep immersing yourself in the language that you are learning. The next phase of language learning is probably the phase that you'll be going through for a very, very long time. I call it the I am really scared to use this language phase. It's definitely the trickiest phase and definitely the longest phase that you're going to go through. It will also be the phase that you will still be going through even if you already moved on to the next phase, sometimes. So this is where it gets a little tricky, but don't worry, I'm here to help you. I have a few tips. Let's first go through what the target of this phase is. Usually during this phase, you want to use what you have learned. You want to be able to speak. You want to type this language. You want to put them in your bio. You want to put them in your tweet. You want to put them in your stories. You want to put it everywhere. But you're very scared because what if you make a mistake? What if you sound like a doof? What if people be like, oh, she's trying too hard? There's a lot of things that can go wrong during this phase. There's a lot of insecurities that we might feel. So that is why I feel like the target of this phase is not to just use the language that you have learned. but also to practice it in a controlled environment. So what are the things that you can do? Alright, during this phase, I first want you to understand what is going on. Why a lot of people are going through this phase and sometimes even get stuck on this phase and not continue learning the language, or even just get stuck on this phase for a few years. Now, the fear of not being able to use what you have learned, or the fear of actually speaking in the language that you have learned, mostly stems from afraid of making mistakes. Yes, and I can sit here and tell you, oh, mistakes is normal, but hey, if Yasmin, you didn't use your own advice, so but we need to acknowledge that first, that we are actually afraid of making mistakes. So that is one reason why we don't want to use the language. Now, think back a step further. Why are we afraid of making those mistakes? Most of the time, we don't want ourselves to look ridiculous. It can also stem from our ego of not wanting to look ridiculous. Yeah, that's something that we definitely have to work on if that's how we feel about making mistakes. Then we have to work on making sure that we understand, we are being good to ourselves, we're being kind to ourselves, that we're learning a new language, so not to have a too high of an expectation for ourselves, because if we do, we're not going to learn new things. Okay, another thing that might stop you from using the language that you are learning is because you hate awkward moments. If you're anything like me, you don't want to be in awkward situations, and this can stem from them not understanding you and constantly asking you, huh? What? Can you repeat that? I'm sorry, what? And like, past the third time you were trying, you just like, I don't want to speak anymore. Yeah, that happened. Or maybe you don't understand them. This is the worst, because you'd be like, I'm sorry, and then they'll be like repeating it, and then you're like, I don't know what I don't understand in the sentence. I don't know what to do now. And you can't get away from the conversation, especially if it's face to face, and you can just smile and nod, and then they'll ask you, you don't understand what I'm saying, don't you? And you'll be like, yeah, I don't. And now you look stupid. It's normal, it's fine, everybody goes through it. Probably you just need to hear some stories to convince you that it is normal. So, what are we going to do when we are in this phase? Now, I actually highly recommend that you take a class. Take a proper class. Find a proper class in your neighborhood that helps you learn your new language, because in a proper class you will not only learn important things to say in the target language, but you are also in a controlled environment. You can make mistakes. The teacher will constantly encourage you to use the language according to the syllabus. But I know a lot of people don't like classes. I know that a lot of people have different ways of learning. I know a lot of people also might not afford to go to a proper class. I also have other suggestions. Now, if you're self-learning, what you can do is to understand the grammar of the language. I know grammar is quite boring, but it's actually very important, especially when you want to learn to make sentences in your target language. So for me, like for Spanish, I actually have this to help me understand how to say a certain thing depending on the time, if it's in the past, if it's in the present, if it's in the future, if I'm speaking of it like in conditional, subjunctive, all those good stuff. So I found a good table that actually explains it very well and put it on the wall. You can do the same thing. If you can't find any good resources, you can also make your own mind map. However, that is best for you. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of resources out there. You can look for it and yeah, print it out, draw your own mind map, etc, etc. Stick it on your learning wall so that you can constantly go back to it. It doesn't matter when in the language learning experienced you are. Now that you understand the grammar, this is when you can also learn to make sentences. You can start writing down, okay, maybe today you learn a new word, and now you need to learn how to use the word in the past tense, or in the future tense, or in the present tense, and etc, etc. And you can also use Google Translate to confirm that the sentence that you are making in your native language matches with the sentence that you are making in your target language. Okay, key point to remember during this phase is to make sure that you are practicing the language in a controlled environment. So if you are going to a proper class, you already have a space for you to do that. But if you're not, what you can do is do like what I'm doing right now, or what I've been doing in my past videos, which is to record myself in front of a camera. You can also do like little Insta stories. You can upload them if you want, but it's okay. You don't pressure yourself. You can just keep it to yourself if you want to. You can also record yourself talking to the phone, like send yourself little voice notes. Pick a topic that you want to talk about on that day and just talk about it, you know, speak in the language that you're learning. One thing that I did, or I mean I'm still doing, is I do tweet and post some stuff in the language that I'm learning. And for me, because I do have friends who speak the language that I'm learning, so it's like it's super normal for me to tweet that. So maybe you can do that as well. Make friends with people who do speak the language that you are learning, even though you guys are not speaking that language, because you know, both of you are more comfortable in speaking like your native language, for example. But then, you know, because you follow each other, you can post something that only the speaker of that language might understand. So it would help you to improve as well. So that is what I mean by a controlled environment. The fear of making a mistake will be less because it's just between you and yourself. And with social media, the only person that would understand it is your followers. And if your accounts are anything like mine, they're not that big, that you only have your close friends following you, it's very comfortable to make mistakes in that way, because it'll just be with your friends. The next phase is the this is awkward phase. It is kind of similar with the I am scared to use this language phase, but this awkward phase is when you do know that you know enough now to carry a proper conversation, but you haven't really tried having a conversation. So the target of this phase is to actually have somebody to talk to. Okay, now time for me to introduce you to one of my favorite apps, HelloTalk. So HelloTalk allows you to meet native speakers of the language that you are learning, and those native speakers that are learning the language that you are natively speaking, and you guys can talk. HelloTalk has this function where you can send voice notes to each other, which is perfect for you to have conversations with someone without actually having a conversation with them, because when you're sending voice notes, you can still delete them if you don't like them, and you can still think about what to say before actually sending those voice notes. You can also send them messages if you want to improve on your writing. There's also a moment step in HelloTalk where you can post stuff. So this is when you can do your posting, because everybody who is native to the language that you are learning can see your posts. They can help you correct your sentences if you make a mistake, and you can also read other people's posts who is learning the language that you are natively speaking. So you can help them improve their language too. Even though one of the biggest tip in this phase is to use HelloTalk, if you do know some native speakers around you and you want to talk to them as well, especially people that you know that speak the language that you are learning, you can apply all these tips that I'm about to tell you if you're in this is awkward phase. Number one, it is okay to make sure that the person who you are talking to knows that you are new to this language and also what level you are in. I have to admit that if they are not learning another language, they wouldn't understand, and they get kind of impatient sometimes, because when you are new to a language, you do stutter a bit and you do take more time to talk. And people who don't learn languages, they don't understand this and they get impatient sometimes. It's worth trying, it's worth mentioning them that you are new and that you are learning, and basically what level are you in. Now, during a conversation, sometimes you'll be speaking about things that maybe you didn't even think about. So my advice is to stick to the words that you know. Stick to the simplest way of saying something. You know, like for the easiest example, like I always say, "Ooh, I'm not so sure." That is a complicated way of saying I don't know. I know how to say I don't know, but I might not know how to say I'm not sure. So always remember that there's always an easier way of saying what you're trying to convey. And because the person that you are speaking to already know, you've established to them that you are just learning the language, they would understand that you are having some limitations on finding the right vocabulary or the right way of speaking about what you want to actually convey. Now, during a conversation, this always happens. You don't understand what they're saying. The best tip that I can give you is ask. To be honest, life will become so much easier when you just ask. You can ask them in the language that you are learning or in the language that both of you speak. It doesn't matter. You just say, "I'm sorry, I don't understand. Can you please repeat that? Can you repeat that slower? Can you please translate that for me? Can you please explain that in a simpler way?" There's so many ways of asking. You can use this to your advantage, okay? Don't take it as you're stuck and you don't want to do this anymore because it's so awkward. Take it as a learning experience, an opportunity for you to learn something new. If, for example, you are speaking in the language and then you find yourself not knowing how to say this one word, like, oh yeah, oh my god, I don't know how to say this in Spanish. Now what? Ask. If the person speaks your native language, you can ask them. Or another thing that you can do is just explain it in a way that is simple. That's if you know all the words that explains the word that you are trying to find, just say it, because they will help you. Native speakers will help you find that word that you're looking for. Another tip to make sure that you can express yourself very well in the language that you are learning is to make sure that you do not have so many in your speech, because that kind of turns people off from the flow of conversation that you're having. It makes people having to focus more on what you're trying to say. So my advice is to stop and think what you're about to say, and just maybe you can learn how to say wait in the language that you are learning and say espera, think, and then convey what you're trying to say. If when you're speaking mid-sentence you forgot how to say something but you know what it is, it's just that it takes time, don't put fillers. Just say and then continue. Alright? Take a moment to think what you want to say. Make sure that you put fillers at the end of your sentences, not in between your sentences. Alright, during the "this is awkward" phase, you are definitely going to improve a lot because you are using the language, you're constantly immersing yourself in the language. So it is only natural that you are constantly improving. And this is when you need to stop using Google Translate. Google Translate is no longer your friend, it is now your enemy. You need to stop depending on Google Translate to help you express yourself. What you have to do now is to read in the target language, because when you read in your target language, you train your mind to think the way that native speakers would say something. One thing that you can do is use online dictionaries, of course, but you need to find dictionaries that is not translating to your native language. You need to find dictionaries that actually explain the words in your target language. So like for me, this is what I have. Like for Spanish, I do use it not just to find the meaning of some words. I also use it to read how to best explain some words, because like when you this is another way of constantly exposing myself to the language, because now I no longer translate from one language to another. I'm understanding a word in that language itself. Another thing that you can do is actually find books that are catered to your level. This would be definitely way easier if you actually took the first thing that I highly recommended, which was to take a class. Most institutions will have books that are catered to your level of learning. You can also follow Twitter account or Instagram accounts that actually post in your target language, because then you will constantly be reading in that language. And remember, never to translate it. I'm not saying that you should like drop it completely, because sometimes it would help if you want to put it in Google Translate and then to understand some meanings, instead of like not knowing what it means and leave it. But I actually would really recommend you to only look up for the words that you don't understand and try to understand the sentence again. Another way that you can do this is actually to ask your language partners. Give them the sentences and ask them, what does this actually mean? And then they can explain to you. If you want, they can explain it to you in your target language, so that you do not have to constantly translate. Okay, we need to stop the whole translating nonsense. Stop it, because when you're in the this is awkward phase, it's time to start thinking in your target language. Finally, hopefully with persistence and work and blood and sweat and tears, okay, I mean, I hope there won't be any tears and blood involved, but you know, after really working with the language that you are learning, you will finally achieve the I am confident phase. You'll achieve that phase. You'll achieve that phase eventually. But even if you are confident, sometimes you still feel awkward. Sometimes you still feel, oh, I'm so scared of using this language. But most of the time, you feel confident. Trust me. Most of the time, you'll feel confident. That's when you know you are already in the I am confident phase. But the best part about being in the I am confident phase is that you can start having voice calls on HelloTalk, because that is the best way to practice having proper conversations with someone, instead of constantly sending voice notes. Because as I said before, you can actually delete the voice notes if you don't like it. But during a conversation, you don't have that option. You just have to speak to the person and wait for their reply, and then, you know, be on your feet, be on your toes, always going back and forth like playing ping pong. And that's the best thing about having a phone call conversation instead of sending voice notes. And during this time, you can also start watching movies without subtitles. It's gonna be scary. I do recommend still putting the subtitle, but not really looking at it. But I know that some of us really can't not read it. Like, we even read the subtitle of the movies in our native language. So yeah, I suggest just close the subtitles and start watching the movie without the subtitles. Because if you are confident enough to use the language, you are confident enough to understand the language, and this is the way that you are going to improve to make sure you will understand the language even more. So I know that's a lot of tips that I'm giving, but I'm not sure if it's specifically going to help your situation. If you do have any comments, if you do have any questions, do write them down below. I'll read them and I'll give some input on my experiences and how maybe it can help you too in language learning. Do like this video, share this video with your language learning friends. Maybe it'll be really helpful to them. And if you are learning languages yourself, I understand your struggle. High five. Let's do this together, and hopefully we will be super fluent. Yeah, I guess that's it. Have an open heart and an open mind, and I'll see you next time. Bye.